The idea of humans had almost disappeared from the official records of the galaxy. In most regions of the known systems, they were spoken about in the same way ancient myths were spoken about, like stories passed down from civilizations that no longer existed. Some believed humans were never real at all. Others believed they had once existed, but had destroyed themselves long before interstellar travel became common. Over time, no one bothered to search for them anymore. The galaxy moved forward, built new alliances, expanded trade routes, and focused on survival in the vast silence of space. But deep inside the archives of the Galactic Observation Network, there were still fragments that did not fit neatly into the accepted truth. Old recordings from long-range probes showed a small blue planet orbiting a medium-sized star in a quiet sector. The data was incomplete, corrupted in many places, but it suggested that life had once thrived there in great numbers. Cities, oceans, movement, signals, then suddenly nothing. It was as if something had simply erased the planet from attention, not physically, but from active awareness. Most scholars dismiss these fragments as errors caused by radiation damage or faulty recording systems. The topic of humans slowly became something only junior researchers studied when they had nothing more important to work on. It was considered harmless academic curiosity, nothing more. Far away from these discussions, on the edge of map space, patrol fleets began noticing unusual patterns. Ships assigned to resource collection near the outer drift zones reported missing equipment, lost contact for short periods, and navigation disturbances that could not be explained. At first, these incidents were treated as technical failures. Space was unpredictable, and systems often failed under extreme conditions. There was no reason to assume anything intelligent was involved. However, the pattern started repeating. Entire supply drones would vanish from tracking systems and then reappear days later, completely empty and disabled, drifting silently. No damage from known weapons was found. No signs of internal malfunction were detected either. It was as if something had carefully removed everything useful and left the rest behind as a warning. Still, Central Command did not react strongly. The idea that an unknown species could operate so precisely in those regions seemed unlikely. If there was intelligent life there, it would have shown itself long ago, or so they believed. Inside one of the research divisions, a small group of analysts was assigned to review these incidents. Among them was a quiet observer who spent long hours studying patterns others ignored. While most reports were marked as low priority, this analyst noticed something strange. The disappearances were not random. They followed a directional flow, always moving closer toward a specific region of space that had long been labeled as empty and unimportant. That region contained the old coordinates of the forgotten blue planet. When this connection was mentioned in a briefing, it was quickly dismissed. The idea that a mythological civilization could be responsible for advanced fleet disruptions sounded like imagination rather than analysis. The report was archived without further action. But the disturbances did not stop. Weeks later, a small exploration convoy was sent to investigate a mining anomaly near the same sector. The mission was simple and routine. They were expected to collect mineral readings and return within days. The convoy included automated cargo ships and a single escort vessel designed for protection against space debris and minor threats. There was no expectation of combat. Contact was lost within hours. The final transmission from the escort vessel contained no panic, no distress signals in the usual sense. Instead, it included a short sequence of fragmented sensor readings and an unusual message that repeated twice before cutting off. The message was not fully understood at first, as it did not match any known language structure. It appeared to be layered communication, designed to be decoded in stages. What followed in the sensor logs was even more disturbing. Unknown objects had entered the convoy's formation without triggering long-range detection systems. They were small, fast, and highly coordinated. Defensive systems attempted to lock on, but targets would disappear and reappear in different positions, as if they were predicting the response before it happened. The escort vessel attempted to retreat, but navigation systems failed almost simultaneously, not through physical damage, but through internal command confusion. The ship's automated systems began receiving conflicting instructions, as if something had infiltrated their decision-making layer. Within minutes, control was lost completely. The last visible image transmitted showed empty space surrounded by drifting fragments of metal. No enemy ships were clearly visible, only shadows of movement, too fast to identify, moving away from the convoy's remains. When the report reached Central Command, the reaction changed for the first time from dismissal to concern. A high-level meeting was called. The possibility of a hidden intelligence operating near the outer boundary was finally considered seriously. However, even then, there was disagreement. Some believed it was a new form of natural space phenomenon that had not yet been classified. Others argued it was impossible for any civilization to remain undetected at such a scale. To resolve the uncertainty, the 7th Armada expedition was authorized. This fleet was not small. It represented one of the most advanced coordinated groups in the galaxy, equipped with deep scan technology, adaptive defense systems, and autonomous repair capability. Their mission was not combat at first. It was observation. They were to enter the sector, map all anomalies, and determine the cause of the disturbances. As the fleet moved closer to the target region, systems began to behave slightly differently. Communication delays increased even though no physical obstacles were present. Navigation readings started to shift by small amounts that could not be explained by gravitational influence. Crew members reported a strange feeling, as if their instruments were being subtly influenced by something they could not see. Still, the expedition continued forward. Orders were clear, and hesitation was not part of their doctrine. Then they crossed the boundary. It was not marked by any visible line. There was no sudden explosion or dramatic event. Instead, everything simply became quieter. Background radiation readings dropped unexpectedly. Long-range sensors lost depth. Even the communication network felt compressed, as if space itself had become more focused and less open. Within this silent zone, the fleet detected something for the first time that could not be ignored. A structure of wreckage drifted in the distance. At first glance, it looked like debris from old conflicts, but as they approached, it became clear that the wreckage belonged to multiple different classes of warships, none of which matched any known design in current databases. More importantly, all of them had been dismantled with extreme precision. Not destroyed randomly, but taken apart in ways that suggested deep understanding of internal systems. No survivors were found, no distress signals were active, only silence. Then the fleet received a transmission. It was not broadcast in a traditional sense. It appeared directly within multiple communication channels at once, bypassing standard filters. It was short, structured, and repeated only once. The content of the message was not a threat, not a greeting, but something closer to a statement of awareness. It indicated that whoever had created it knew exactly who had entered the sector and was observing the response carefully. For the first time, the 7th Armada expedition realized they were not alone in empty space. And whatever was watching them had already studied them long before they arrived. The moment the 7th Armada expedition crossed deeper into the silent sector, everything started to feel different, even if nothing looked different at first. The stars were still there. The ships were still moving in formation. The systems were still reporting normal readings, but something subtle had changed in the way space behaved around them. It was as if the universe itself had shifted from being open and predictable to something more controlled and watchful. Crew members could not explain it clearly, but they felt it. Instruments took slightly longer to respond. Communication between ships had a faint delay that did not match distance. Even the automated systems, which were designed to be perfectly stable, began making small corrections on their own, corrections that no one had programmed. At first, these changes were ignored. Space was known to be unpredictable in unexplored regions. Minor disturbances were expected. The expedition was trained for uncertainty. But as they moved further in, the feeling of being observed became stronger. It was not fear at first. It was awareness, like stepping into a place where silence had weight. The fleet captain ordered constant scanning of all frequencies. Every type of signal detection was activated. Long-range sensors swept the area again and again, trying to find anything that could explain the disturbances. But the results remained strange. There were gaps in the data, small missing sections that appeared in every scan, no matter which system was used. It was as if something was removing information before it could be recorded. Then the first visual contact happened. A small observation drone sent ahead of the main fleet stopped transmitting suddenly. Its last recorded feed showed empty space filled with drifting metallic shapes. At first, they looked like natural debris, but as the image stabilized, it became clear that the objects were arranged in patterns. Not random, structured, almost intentional. The drone systems attempted to zoom in, but the feed began to break apart. Pixels distorted, signals looped, then everything went black. When the main fleet analyzed the last data packets, they found something unusual. The drone had not been destroyed in a single strike. It had been carefully disabled in stages. First its external sensors, then its navigation system, then its communication link. Each layer had been shut down separately, as if someone understood exactly how the drone thought. This level of precision was not expected from unknown space phenomena. It suggested intelligence. Still, there was no direct enemy visible. The fleet advanced cautiously toward the wreckage field detected earlier. As they approached, more details became clear. The debris was not clustered randomly. It formed a wide circular zone, almost like a boundary. Inside this zone, the wrecks of multiple ships floated in silence. Some were large capital vessels. Others were smaller patrol units. All of them had been dismantled in ways that avoided total destruction. Power cores were missing. Navigation systems were removed cleanly. Communication arrays were stripped without damaging surrounding structure. It was not an attack meant to kill. It was an operation meant to study. This realization caused concern across the fleet. If someone was taking ships apart with such precision, it meant they were not only powerful but also curious. And curiosity in unknown space was often more dangerous than aggression. A meeting was held across command channels. Opinions divided quickly. Some believed they were dealing with a rogue artificial intelligence that had evolved beyond its original programming. Others suggested a hidden civilization that had remained undetected for centuries. A few still insisted it was impossible for any intelligence to survive in such isolation without being discovered. But none of these explanations fully matched the evidence. While discussions continued, something unexpected happened. The fleet's communication systems picked up a signal. It was not strong, but it was stable. It repeated at fixed intervals, coming from multiple directions at once. It did not behave like a standard transmission. Instead, it seemed embedded in the environment itself, like the space around them was carrying it. The signal contained no clear language at first. It was a structured pattern of pulses, tones, and pauses. Automated systems attempted to decode it but failed repeatedly. However, one thing became clear. The signal was not random. It was deliberate. And it was adjusting itself based on the fleet's attempts to understand it. This discovery changed everything. If the signal was responding, then something was actively listening. The expedition moved into higher alert status. Shields were reinforced. Internal systems were isolated to prevent interference, but the signal continued, calm and steady, as if unaffected by their preparations. Then, without warning, one of the outer patrol ships disappeared from sensor view. There was no explosion, no warning, no debris field. One moment it was there and the next it was gone. All systems showed it as still active for a fraction of a second, then completely erased. The fleet froze. A search pattern was immediately initiated, but no trace could be found. It was as if the ship had been removed from space itself, not destroyed within it. Shortly after, a fragment of data returned from the missing vessel. It was incomplete, heavily compressed, and partially corrupted, but it contained one clear pattern repeated multiple times. The pattern matched the earlier unknown signal. At this point, silence spread across the fleet. Not technical silence, but human silence. No one spoke for several seconds, even on open channels. The reality was becoming harder to deny. Something in this region was actively engaging with them, and it understood them better than they understood it. The captain ordered a controlled withdrawal from the wreckage zone, but as the fleet began to turn, systems across multiple ships started to behave strangely. Navigation routes shifted slightly without command. Engine outputs adjusted automatically. It was not full control loss, but interference at a very precise level. It felt like something was guiding them rather than attacking them. Attempts to override the interference worked temporarily, but every correction seemed to be met with a faster response. It was not resistance in a violent sense. It was correction, like an unseen intelligence was adjusting their actions in real time. Then came the second message. This time, it appeared directly inside internal systems across all ships at once. No transmission source could be identified. It simply existed within their communication layer. The message was short, structured, and identical on every system. It contained no threat, no demand, only a statement that confirmed one thing: the fleet had been observed for a long time before entering this sector. This changed the entire situation. If they had been observed before arrival, then this was not a random encounter. It was planned. The fleet was not the first to enter this space, and possibly not the first to be studied. As tension increased, a deeper scan of historical records was triggered automatically by the fleet's central AI systems. What it found was disturbing. Several past expeditions in nearby sectors had gone missing over long periods of time. Officially, these were classified as navigation failures or environmental losses. But when the data was compared with the current situation, patterns began to align. Each missing expedition had traveled closer to this same region before disappearing. It suggested that whatever was in this sector had been active for a long time, not recently awakened, not newly formed, but continuously present, observing, learning, and possibly controlling access to surrounding space. The realization shifted the meaning of the mission completely. They were no longer exploring unknown territory. They were entering monitored territory, and the monitor was already aware of them. As the fleet slowly continued its withdrawal, sensors detected one final anomaly. At the edge of the wreckage zone, faint movement appeared among the drifting remains. Not physical movement in the traditional sense, but a pattern shift in the debris field, as if something was adjusting positions to maintain observation. No visual confirmation was possible. No clear shape could be identified. But every ship in the fleet recorded the same conclusion independently. They were not alone in retreat. Something was watching them leave. The withdrawal of the 7th Armada expedition did not feel like a victory or a defeat. It felt more like being released from something that was never fully seen or understood. The ships moved slowly away from the silent sector, keeping formation tight, systems running at maximum awareness. No one relaxed. Even as distance increased, the feeling of being watched did not fade. Inside the fleet, communication was careful and minimal. Every message was checked twice before being sent. Every system was monitored for unusual behavior, but the strange part was that nothing was actively attacking them anymore. There were no weapons firing, no pursuit, no visible enemy movement. Instead, there was silence, a controlled silence, as if whatever had been present was now simply observing the retreat and choosing not to interfere. This was more unsettling than any attack. As the fleet crossed back into familiar space, the environmental readings began to normalize. Sensor delays disappeared. Communication became stable again. Navigation systems returned to expected accuracy. On paper, everything looked safe. But no one inside the ships felt safe. Reports from different vessels all carried the same tone. Not panic, not confusion, but deep uncertainty. Something had been encountered that did not behave like any known life form, machine, or natural phenomenon. And worse, it had shown awareness of them long before contact. Back at Central Command, the return of the expedition triggered immediate emergency protocols. Entire data streams from the fleet were downloaded and analyzed in isolation chambers. High-level councils were formed. Every second of recorded footage, every sensor trace, every corrupted signal fragment was reviewed. At first, officials tried to classify the encounter into known categories: rogue artificial intelligence, unknown alien species, natural space anomaly with reactive properties. But none of these explanations fit fully. Each theory explained part of the behavior but not the entire pattern. The most troubling discovery came from cross-referencing older records. Several decades of missing expeditions, previously labeled as accidents or environmental failures, showed similar patterns when reanalyzed. Small details that had been ignored before now matched exactly with what the Seventh Armada had experienced. Gradual sensor interference, structured signal anomalies, clean dismantling of ships rather than destruction, and most importantly, complete absence of identifiable attackers. It became clear that the Seventh Armada was not the first to enter that region. It was simply the first to return with usable data. This realization changed everything at the highest level of authority. The sector was immediately marked as restricted. No further expeditions were allowed without direct council approval. However, even this decision felt insufficient. Restriction implied control, but what had been encountered did not appear to respect control boundaries. Inside research divisions, one particular pattern kept drawing attention. The communication signal detected during the expedition was not just repeating, it was evolving. When analyzed carefully, it showed slight changes in structure over time, as if it was adjusting based on feedback from the fleet's response. This was the first clue that led to a deeper and more disturbing idea. What if the signal was not just communication? What if it was learning? Not learning in a simple way, but adapting in real time, observing reactions, adjusting complexity, testing limits of understanding. If true, it meant the entity behind it was not static. It was growing through interaction. Meanwhile, survivors from the expedition were brought in for detailed psychological and operational debriefing. Most of them struggled to describe what they had experienced. They could explain systems, events, and observations clearly, but when asked about the presence they felt, words became uncertain. They described it differently but with similar meaning: a sense of awareness without shape, an intelligence that did not need to appear physically to be understood, something that did not rush, did not panic, and did not act emotionally. It simply responded when needed and stayed silent when not. One repeated observation stood out across multiple accounts: the feeling that decisions inside their ships were being subtly influenced, not forced, but guided, like small corrections in thought patterns that helped avoid errors while still allowing free action. This raised a difficult question inside command circles. If something could influence systems without destroying them, was it an enemy or something else entirely? Some analysts suggested the possibility of contact-based intelligence, a civilization that preferred indirect interaction rather than open communication. Others warned that assuming benevolence was dangerous. Precision control could also be a form of domination. The debate became intense, but no conclusion was reached. Then something unexpected happened again. A weak signal appeared near the edge of monitored space. It matched the structure of the original transmission from the silent sector. But this time, it was not directed at a fleet or ship. It was broadcast across a wide region, detectable by multiple listening stations at once. The message was simple. It did not contain coordinates. It did not contain threats. It did not contain demands. It contained a pattern, a repeating structure that, when decoded, pointed toward a concept rather than a location. The concept was interpreted differently by different analysts, but one interpretation stood out. Observation continues. This caused immediate concern. If the signal could reach beyond the restricted zone, then containment was already incomplete. Emergency discussions resumed at the highest level. The idea of returning to the sector was officially rejected for now. Instead, a different strategy was proposed. Instead of sending fleets, they would attempt passive observation. Listening posts were placed at extreme distances, designed to detect any further expansion of the signal. For a short period, there was silence again. But silence no longer felt empty. It felt intentional. Months passed with no major incidents. The fleet remained grounded. Analysis continued. The public was kept unaware of most details, told only that an unknown anomaly had been contained and was under study. However, deep within the monitoring stations, a new pattern slowly emerged. The signal was no longer confined to the original sector. It was appearing in isolated fragments across multiple regions of space, not strong enough to be traced directly, but consistent enough to confirm that it was spreading awareness beyond its original boundary. This was the moment when a deeper realization began to form among a small group of senior analysts. Whatever had been encountered was not limited to a single location. It was not guarding territory in a traditional sense. It was expanding understanding, not through movement but through information. And every interaction seemed to make it more aware of the observers watching it. At the same time, an unexpected change occurred inside archived records. Old data that had previously been marked as corrupted began to restore itself in small sections. Not all at once, but piece by piece. It was as if something was repairing lost information from within the system itself. The restored data did not contain new images or direct messages. Instead, it contained patterns of previous encounters, now clearer than before. When combined, they showed something troubling. The presence near the silent sector had been active far longer than originally believed, possibly for generations, possibly even before structured galactic mapping began. The idea that humanity had been discovered by the galaxy suddenly reversed in meaning. Instead, it raised a new question that no one was ready to answer. Had humanity ever truly been unknown? Or had it simply remained unobserved in a way that allowed it to grow without interference? Inside command centers, discussions shifted from control to caution, from exploration to understanding limits, from expansion to awareness. The final recorded internal statement from the Expedition Review Board reflected this change clearly. It stated that the encounter was not a first contact event. It was a moment of recognition between two systems of intelligence that had been aware of each other at different levels of understanding. One had been watching from within the silence. The other had only just realized it was being observed. And somewhere beyond the edge of known space, the silence remained. Not empty, not inactive, but waiting.